Good afternoon. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to the Miami Sports Break. Dave Eversole here, joined by Jakari Givens, and today with special guest Brady Hawk from the Five Reasons Sports Network. He actually got a break today from all the content he's always putting out. So wanted to get him on today to talk about the state of the Heat, their recent struggles, and if we can get things going right. How's it going today, fellas, on this beautiful Friday?
Good,
It's
good.
going
Appreciate
pretty
having me on.
well.
Awesome, man. Yeah, it's been a rough week for the Heat, of course. Lost five straight, obviously. No Jimmy Butler, just now getting Hero back. So wanted to get Brady here on. He just wrote an article today about Precious Achua, which we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But just kind of want to get his gauge on the team. I know they're close to possibly getting Jimmy Butler back over the weekend. So Brady, when Jimmy comes back, do you think it's going to be an immediate turnaround for the Heat, or how do you feel it's going to be in those first couple of games with Jimmy back? And is that the big answer to hopefully turn this season around before it slips away from him?
Well, I don't think Jimmy Butler is going to be playing like Jimmy Butler upon arrival, but I do think his impacts immediately because you look at guys like Duncan Robinson, who everybody looks to Bam Adebayo as the guy that helps him the most, but it seems like Jimmy's the guy that has the gravity when he attacks that Duncan gets more opportunities. So you could see a guy like Duncan start to play better when he returns. But ultimately, everybody plays better when Jimmy Butler returns. So I think it's going to take a couple games for him to get, back into that same shape, get back into that same basketball level, NBA level. But I do think the team will elevate the first game he comes back. And right now, they're going to have an easy stretch coming up. So if he returns, I think this is the way to turn it around.
If I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, Jimmy has been cleared already. He's just
Yeah.
out due to conditioning, correct?
Correct.
Hopefully they can kind of just right the ship here. I know you're 18 games in the season. Obviously, 6-12 is not where anyone expected this team to be. But if you look at the roster as a whole, even with the return of Jimmy Butler, what do you think that's going to do specifically? You mentioned Duncan Robinson a little bit, and he's struggled of late over the last three games. I think he's only shooting 25% from three, 5 for 25 in his last three games. And I know he's not really a shot creator with the ball in his hands. He kind of needs other guys, like you said, to get him involved in the game. So what do you see specifically with him and Butler, that dynamic that is going to hopefully turn it around for Duncan as well?
Well, first off, I think everybody just needs continuity. That was the big thing about this Heat team this year was that they're running it back, that they have pretty much the same personnel, that they got, a few new guys that they're just plugging right in, but they haven't had any continuity this year. They don't know on any nightly basis who's going to be playing with them because everybody's basically questionable game time decisions, and you have no idea who you're lining up with. But after a few games, I feel like Duncan Robinson getting in a rhythm in a normal rotation, I think is the big thing because you're getting guys just thrown in, that aren't going to be playing later in the season right now. So if Duncan Robinson gets these normal lineups, normal rotations, his last four games have been struggles, and it's been ever since they came back with all the guys out. But his role is never to be a lead guy. Even to start the season, his new thing now is that every team he's atop of the scouting report. That's going to be like that from now on out. But no Jimmy Butler, no Tyler Hero, and no Goran Dragic over this stretch hurts him even more because now he's basically number one on that scouting report to shut him down. And then that's when it comes down to the role players, and they weren't hitting the shots that were necessary, and that's what led to those losses. But I think just continuity, chemistry, everybody just getting healthy, that's all going to lead to getting this thing back under control.
I think
Yeah,
that the expectations have also hurt the Heat as well. When you go to the NBA Finals, it's no more everybody is taking them lightly. You're getting every team's best shot, and that's kind of what has hit them. So you have to just factor that in. And plus, I think Miami needs to go get a true point guard. I've been on record saying Lonzo Ball would be a great fit, but I don't know who Miami could possibly move to get Lonzo. I know the trade rumors with James Harden were early on in the season, which kind of I think has been a cloud over Miami. Miami has had a cloud over their season with the expectations and also all the trade talks. You're talking about guys going out there trying to perform. You got Duncan Robinson, who's at the top of every trade talk. Now we moved on from the James Harden thing. Now you're gonna have the Bradley Beal talk. So it's just these guys just have to get their feet under them, and the expectation is Miami has to play Miami basketball to compete now because every team is not taking them oh, it's just the Miami Heat. We know they're going to play hard. Nah, they got a bullseye on their back, and every team is going to get up to play them.
Yeah, I agree. But I'm also a little bit concerned about some of the guys down lower in the rotation, the 10 through 15 guys, because you're not really getting any contributions from the lower half of your roster. And I know people talked about the Heat having good depth. What are you seeing from guys like Strus and Vincent, KZ, those kind of guys? Is it just too much? Are they just being thrown into a bad situation? Is the talent ceiling just not there? How do you think some of those guys are going to fit into the long-term plans of the team once they're whole with Jimmy Butler back, with Hero and everybody playing at full strength? Where do you see some of these fringe guys contributing down the road?
It's hard to get a real evaluation, I think, on these guys because currently they're playing roles that they'll never probably play for this Heat team. Gabe Vincent's basically running most of Miami's sets in a game like yesterday, which is something that'll never happen. But I think, everybody's kind of labeled Gabe Vincent as a shooter before anybody saw him. But I've been impressed with what he's done in the offensive end. I think he's very good out of pick and rolls. He's very good at getting to the rim. He's good at, stopping in the mid-range area. So I think he's been pretty good offensively. And once his three-pointer, becomes consistent, I think he could be a solid player. But like I said, it's just hard to fully evaluate a guy like him at this stage. I think Max Strus, he's pretty one-dimensional offensively, but he gives you what you can need. Say you trade for a guy like Bradley Beal and empty the tank. He's a guy that could stretch, get a guy like Bradley Beal the room, to work, or anybody. So I think having guys like that, KZ Paul is the interesting one. I think that's the one everybody's going to look to. He's had very good flashes and had great moments, but still it just doesn't seem like there's a full trust level there with Coach Spo. And I think there's spots, defensively, I mentioned there's, a bit of lack of awareness. Sometimes he goes for a double team and he's just in the wrong spots at times, but one-on-one, aggressive-wise, he's always there. But the issue with him, I think, is offensively. They don't really know where he's going to go offensively.
Yeah, they try to make him a spot up shooter. I don't think that's his game though.
Yeah, and he's hitting the occasional three right now, but that's not where he's going to be. I'd like to see him put the ball on the floor and get to the rim, and we saw that yesterday. I think for like 2 possessions, we saw him getting scored at the rim, and I think that's his game. But right now, him not knowing what his role is offensively is the issue, and that's what's leading to him not going to be able to play.
Yeah, I think he needs to give you kind of that Derek Jones Jr. sort of role, defensive guy. He guards multiple positions. You saw his versatility guarding guys on the wing, on the perimeter, whatever. He's very, very switchy. He fits that Heat mentality, like you said, on the defensive end, but his fit offensively is going to be a big question mark. But I want to turn to somebody whose offensive fit is starting to come into place and their fit overall, and that's Precious Achiuwa. With obviously with him and Bam playing a little bit together over the last few games in very spot situations, you've maybe seen a glimpse of the future. I've been really impressed with his basketball IQ for a rookie. He's come in ready to play. He seems to not be out of place on either end of the floor. He's giving you great energy, and I think he's going to really develop into something good to complement Bam. What do you see with him specifically that's been a positive in his development in his rookie season?
Well, the number one thing I think that I always go to is that he's probably Miami's number one most consistent player on the entire team. That's the difference if you're looking at KZ. The difference between those two is what you're getting from Precious Achiuwa every night. You're going to get aggression on the defensive end, and you're going to get a guy that sets screens, rolls to the basket, and he's a threat above the rim. And that's what he's done. Yesterday, Bam was not playing great. He got inserted, and he sparked a 10-0 run immediately as he got put in. And that's kind of where the thought process comes in, that there's something that's going to change there with the Precious situation. He's been looked at as the guy that's going to be the relief for Bam coming in, but I think they're going to look to do a bigger role than that, especially in these games. Bam's getting increased minutes with all the guys out, and that means Precious is getting less minutes. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be them just forcing Precious to play with Bam because there's a bit of question offensively, even though Bam expanding his range helps that even more. But I do think there's going to be something to get Precious more involved because, him being the most consistent player and, playing behind Bam when he gets a break is, I think it's going to change.
Like the thing I think that's helping him is his role is defined. He know what he is expected to do. Like with KZ, we don't know what he can. Like I don't think he has a clear role with Miami yet, but with Precious they do, and it just comes back to this. I was watching Charles Barkley yesterday. He does say some outrageous things, but yesterday it came down to he made a great point. A lot of these guys just not ready yet. Like when you look at the KZs of the world and stuff, and that's why they be inconsistent. It's not that they're bad players; they're just not ready yet. And now, once and it takes some guys longer. I think Precious is what 21, 22.
Mm-hmm.
So
21.
you're looking at a guy who has a little bit more playing experience. You're talking about KZ. He hasn't had a summer league yet, and I just think that he's not ready yet. And once he gets ready, he's in a perfect system and can become a great player. You look at Christian Wood, who's they have similar type games. Christian Wood struggled early in his career, but now he's having a breakout season because he was ready. So I just think that KZ's not ready yet, and I think Miami was doing the right thing with him, not playing him unless they needed to, and just let him get better in practice, becoming more used to the NBA game.
Yeah, but I do want to
Brady.
say though with KZ, the issue is when you're talking about the issues that are involved with him, all of them are cured by playing time. Every one of them, decision making, awareness, spots on the floor offensively. The only way that is cured is offensively. And you look at a game like yesterday when they had their 5 bench guys were Vincent, Strus, Okpala, Precious, and Haslam. And you expected Okpala to get earlier minutes, and still they were, pretty deep into the, first half, and then that's when he came in. That's the parts that I think is the most surprising. That in a situation that they're in right now, with so many guys out, and they're not giving him the amount of playing time that many are expecting, I think that tells you the direction, how long term he will be for this team.
And I think when they're healthy, obviously these guys are going to start to go back into their more traditional roles. I think they're being asked to do way too much with a lot of different moving parts, and the team's going to naturally struggle. And obviously with the short turnaround from the long postseason, getting to the NBA Finals, which, let's face it, nobody expected this to be a finals team. I think the bubble helped the Heat more than any other team. It's pretty obvious here. And now I think you're kind of seeing the other side of that coin.
I disagree with that just because everybody was playing under the same circumstances, and they still are playing under the same circumstances. The only difference is Miami's in Miami. It's no bubble, but they're not playing in front of no fans. It's still an open gym, so I don't think that's an excuse. Miami beat every team they beat last year because they were better. And this year, I think I think what people are missing is Jay Crowder was a big factor in why Miami was winning. And I just think Jimmy Butler, they were healthy. They were probably the most healthy team in the bubble. They didn't face an injury until the finals in game 1. So Miami was healthy. You look at with the Celtics had injuries. Gordon Hayward was out. You look at the Bucks, Giannis was out. So I don't think the bubble was the excuse. I just think Miami was they were on a good run. They were a great team, and they still are a good team. The only difference is they're not healthy. The COVID break killed them, and the NBA mishandled it. If we want to be honest, they mishandled that because they should have canceled Miami's game in Washington.
The Wizards game.
Every team that's been to Washington had just a outbreak.
Yeah, and that's very unfortunate, obviously. But the Heat are never one team to make an excuse. Obviously, they're just going to go for the next game, and I think this 4-game stretch is going to be pretty favorable for them. They're going to wrap those last 4 up with 2 against Washington. That should be pretty interesting, obviously, with everything going on there. But what do you see from Miami to take out of positive? Obviously, the development of Bam and Precious, but give Heat fans another nugget to kind of just take solace in with the struggles of the team. Like, what is there a light at the end of the tunnel? What's going to be the long-term outcome of this team this season? Do you think they're going to be a playoff team? Are they going to get it right? Or are they just going to kind of be a 500, 7, 8 seed? Are they going to make it up to the top 4 of the East? What do you think the ceiling for this team is as it is right now?
Well, I definitely think it's hard to fully predict or look forward to because we don't know who's going to be playing tomorrow, let alone, a couple months from now. But if they get healthy, I think everybody knows where they'll end up. I think, as much as people want to talk about, certain players, this being a bit of a different team, without Jay Crowder or different guys, this is generally the same team, except, Bam's taken a huge leap. So in my eyes, I think they've improved in that area. And we've yet to see, this new Bam with a guy like Jimmy. So I think you can talk about the entire team as a whole, but looking at certain combinations, we've looked at every single combination these last few games. We've seen Goran and Bam. We've seen Hero and Bam. We've seen, Goran and Hero. It's just been ongoing, circle effect. But I do think the bright thing is that, you're seeing little improvements. You look yesterday, Tyler Hero comes back after missing 7 straight games and, basically wills them that fourth quarter to try to get them back into it. So I think all these little things, seeing these improvements, game by game, that once this team is healthy, it's pretty clear where they can end up.
Where do you see Kendrick Nunn fitting in the rotation? Because he's shown flashes this last stretch as well. So he's an interesting guy. He's somebody that can create his own shot. He's not really a distributor per se, but he's somebody who can give you instant offense in whatever role. Where do you see him fitting into the rotation? You see him being a starting guy moving forward? You see him being that kind of 6th, 7th guy off the bench to give them a spark in the second unit? Where do you see Kendrick Nunn fitting in once the team is healthy?
Well, what's interesting, if you look at it on paper, he's basically the 5th guard. I think that's what's always harped on because you're obviously going with Goran Hero. Either if you're going to mark Robinson or Butler as one, and then obviously Bradley. Spoelstra likes to get to a 9-man rotation, and I don't know if Nunn is a part of that 9-man rotation if you're looking at it on paper, but for the rest of the season, there's going to be no 9-man rotation. They can't even get 9 players, let alone a 9-man rotation. So I think Nunn will have playing time the rest of the year off the bench. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens. I don't want to say playoff time because right now they're not a playoff team, but down the line into that, time period, where will Nunn fit in? I think that's a question that everybody has. But I do think the level that he's playing at is pretty impressive right now. I think he's improved in a lot of areas. I think, the scoring is pretty much the same thing where it has been before. But the part that stood out to me is, his playmaking. He's a lot more confident in his playmaking. I think confidence in general, I think everybody just basically bases that with Kendrick Nunn. But I think instead of marking confidence with scoring, his confidence changes everything for him as a player. As a defender, he's,
it's more engaged.
More engaged. He makes the passes. He'll throw the lob pass instead of being scared to, take that chance. So everything that he does is just based off confidence. And seeing him have confidence right now is pretty promising.
Yeah. He reminds me of Nick Young, man, where a guy he's volatile, but when he on, he like J.R. Smith, Nick Young. He instant offense when he's on, but it's what you're saying. His confidence, if his confidence gets hurts, he's less engaged than normal. But I do have one more question for you, Brady. Bradley Beal, where do you see Miami fitting in that race? I know reports have came out that the Lakers and the Clippers are interested in bringing him in. I seen D-Wade kind of tweet at it and was like, come on, man. So do you think Bradley Beal to Miami is just a set for a going conclusion because of the fit? And when it comes to fit, it's the best fit for him naturally. But do you see it happening? And add on to that, what about Victor Oladipo? Is this another guy that Miami's looking at amidst the struggles?
We'll start off with Beal. I think that's the guy that's been talked about for I don't know how long. He's been, marked as a guy the Heat would like to look at. But now, as a fit wise, first off, I think it's perfect. I'm much higher on him as a fit than James Harden. I think that's just a perfect fit for him. He's never played with a Jimmy Butler, but more so he's never played with a Bam Adebayo. So I do think everything you could base offense out of those two, pick and rolls, everything of that nature. I think that's a pretty great big three to start off with. You're looking at a guy that's on a team that has the worst record, but the 4th best offense, and that's solely because of him. So seeing what he does right now offensively, that's a guy you'd want on your team. So I do think it's a possibility. I think Miami has enough assets to do it. It just comes down to, the frustration level of him rising, and I think it's rising game by game.
I think it's rising. Yes.
It's rising rapidly right now. Right.
So Miami might try to wait him out. Miami could try to wait the long game too here and just let it unfold for a little bit.
Another interesting name though, and I know it probably won't happen because I don't think the Hawks are trading the division. John Collins. I think John Collins and Bam Adebayo would be a great fit together. I know him and Trae Young are having some chemistry issues, but Would John Collins also be added to that mix? Like, hey, can look at him as a possible trade option?
I definitely think they're going to be, if they're going to look at something, they're going to look at a four, a guy that they can play next to Bam, because obviously Kelly Olynyk is not the long-term route. So I think John Collins is a great fit. I think what we're seeing from Bam expanding his range and being a comfortable mid-range shooter, I think makes these even more viable options that they're going to, attack these types of guys. I do really like John Collins as a fit. I know he's from, down in South Florida area, so I know he'd love probably to come back down here. But I think everybody would like to come back down to South Florida. So I definitely do think that's a great fit, though. I think to find a guy to put next to Bam that you can trust, a young guy that's developing right now and can help you in the areas that they need and rebounding and different things like that. I think that's a pretty
can shoot the three can shoot the three consistently too.
right. So I do, and I don't think you're looking at a price that's not as high as these other guys. So you can still keep a good part of your team intact.
Is that the biggest need for the Heat right now? You think size and rebounding, somebody can give you a little bit more on the block versus obviously a perimeter player? I think a lot of people would agree with that being more of a pressing need for the team because you see him getting killed, especially on the offensive glass and the turnover issues. Obviously, the chemistry is a big part of the turnover issues, but I think at the other side too, missing Avery Bradley and Jimmy Butler on the defensive end. Can you touch a little bit about what you're seeing from the team defensively as far as, with the zone, with the three-quarter court, things like that? What else do you think they can do defensively to improve as a team?
Well, a healthy team to start the season, one of the biggest things I was surprised with and that looked really good was the second unit's defensive strengths. Avery Bradley and Andre Iguodala have great chemistry on the defensive end. They're both great defenders on the perimeter, especially when you mentioned the 2-3 zone, when they would put those two up at the top of the 2-3 zone and have Precious down low in the middle. That's pretty strong for your second unit while Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, and others get to take a break on the bench. So I do think that's great. They have the personnel to have lineups to be good defenders, but the lineups you're mostly going to go to have to include these guys that are, not great defenders. You need to have the shooters. So you have to make the decision, on nights when you look at the other night when they're not shooting well, it just seems like a night you should just go to your defensive, lineups. But when the shooting's going well and you want to make it an offensive game, I guess you go to the other route. But that's the decision. When you have a starting lineup with Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, and Kelly Olynyk, the goal is, obviously to just shoot the lights out. So that's when you kind of look at the other routes. The reason why they went the Precious Achiuwa with Bam Adebayo route the other night was because their shooting was awful. And that's why I've been, discussing that we're probably not going to see it much, but I think we will. Eventually need to see it pretty soon. Because that was the only reason we saw that. And, I don't know what the next step is with that situation, but I do think defensively, putting guys working guys in like Precious and Bam together, becoming fully healthy is just the big key, because then right now we're evaluating guys like Vincent and Strus talking about defensive issues, that I don't think that's a viable, evaluation.
Yeah, I agree. What's your ideal closing lineup with everybody healthy? What is your ideal closing five for this team?
That's a tough question. I think
that's why you're here.
Yeah, I think obviously Jimmy, obviously Bam, and probably right now I'd probably have to say, if they could go the small route, I wouldn't be surprised that if they start closing Goran, Avery, and Tyler, with Jimmy and Bam, I think that's the lineup you go to. At least you have the three defenders, and you have Goran who can, score at all three levels. Then obviously Tyler, who's evolving into a guy that can play on ball. And I think in those lineups, Tyler will play on ball.
All those guys are good team defenders. Obviously, Avery Bradley, Jimmy Butler, we see more as an individual, but Goran Dragic, Hero, they all have showed flashes of being great team defenders. And that's all you want out of them anyway, is just, to be great team defenders. It's not about them being, elite on-ball defenders, because we're never going to get that. But to being a great team defender, yes. So I agree with you on that, Brady. Like, I think that Miami's biggest issue is health right now. And that's and to be fair, Miami hasn't been blown out in any games either. They've been competitive in majority of all their games. They just haven't had the firepower to finish. Like, you look at the other night against the Clippers, which they should have won that game because that's a bad loss. But if you have Jimmy that night, Jimmy closes that game, Miami wins that game. So it's just they don't have the firepower to close. They have the firepower to keep up, and then it's like as soon as they get to the end, it's like, damn, bro, we just ain't got it.
And I want to mention with the discussion of the closing lineup, you mentioned, we don't include Duncan Robinson in there, that's the part that everybody harps on. You're, looking forward, either to contract year, you're looking at him as a player. Obviously, this is, when he's not shooting well over these games, but even when he is shooting well, it's hard to see him in a closing lineup because you obviously want a guy like Tyler or Goran in there. You can't have this many of those types of defenders. So this is why it makes it interesting. I think he can go basically off, the hot hand that night. He can just pick and choose that it can differ. But on a nightly basis, I think, he might not, be in the closing lineup, and his fourth quarter numbers have not been great all year. So
do you think he'd be more effective possibly not starting and coming off the bench early, Robinson, just temporarily, even just to sort of let him reset a little bit when everybody's back? Do you think, obviously he's been accustomed to being a starter, but do you think maybe putting him on the second unit against other teams' second units and maybe not their elite wing defenders might give him a little bit more confidence now? Or you just got to let him ride it out and just turn around on his own?
No, I think it's the complete opposite because I think he's basically playing with a second unit right now, and that's why he's struggling. So when he does play with that actual first unit that he hasn't played with in I don't know how long, when he gets to play with a Jimmy Butler and he gets to play with a Tyler Hero in a healthy starting lineup, is when he'll begin to thrive automatically. And you saw it the other night. Even when he's not shooting well, he's still getting shots up, and that's the most important thing for a shooter. The difference is a guy like Tyler or Goran, if they're not shooting well, they can get to the rim and do other things. Where Duncan, you're not seeing that yet. You're starting to see him do little things like run a pick and roll and be able to throw a lob pass or things like that, but he's not able to, attack the basket consistently and score. So I do think, that to answer your question, the starting lineup I think will always be where he fits in, obviously, but when he gets those guys back, I think he'll begin to thrive.
Yeah, and I've also liked the Hero and Precious dynamic. They sort of giving you some of the same things that Goran and Bam give you with the lobs, with the rolling, things like that. So I'm really interested to see how those two develop more chemistry as time goes on, because I think how Precious fits in is going to be really key to the success of this team on both ends of the floor, because he's going to develop more offensively. And if you look at his numbers, in 10 minutes in the last game, I think he put up 10 and 5, and he only played 10 minutes in the last game. So he's got a really high ceiling, I think, as well. So there's just going to be a lot of questions. Like I said, the health of this team is the number one concern. And I think we might have a whole different conversation a month from now after this four game stretch of winnable games with the team rounding back into health. And maybe they can kind of turn it around before it's too late. So want to thank everybody for joining us here. We're going to wrap things up. Appreciate Brady taking time to step on with us on this Friday afternoon. Brady, tell everybody where they can catch up with you on social and what else you got working on.
Yeah, Twitter is at Brady Hawk 305, and a bunch of articles constantly on 5reasonsports.com.
Yeah, always staying busy. So appreciate everybody. We're going to be back here on Tuesday afternoon with another Miami Sports Break. Going to recap everything from the weekend. Hopefully it's a little bit better news for the Heat. And we're going to catch up with everybody then.
Go Bucks. Go Bucks. Tampa Bay. Brady.
Brady
the GOAT.
I got to mute that.